Eric's.
Omar.
Brandon did not even need to edit that. That is true timing. And I've been told as a musician that if you try something often enough, eventually you'll land on rhythm. If someone, you might have a friend that doesn't know about when to clap. It's on the 2 and 4. A lot of people clap on the 1 and 3. Eventually, if they keep clapping, they're going to hit the right beat. And that's just what happened here today. But Helms, I don't want to start off too positively because there's not controversy, but I'm glad you're here because we brought the trio, the holy triumvirate of iron culture, back together because Trexler, I want to give you a short summary of what happened the episode prior to your monster episode with Helms, okay? And that is, I read a review because the people leave reviews. Trextopia is now, they are a strong contingent of the iron culture, but even the iron culture diehards, typically people leave 5 stars. So we're doing an episode. Everything's going great. Myself and Helms are chopping it up. The vibe's immaculate. Okay. And then I read a review, Trex, and this is a true story. It's a 5-star review. For those that are unaware, they're on Apple iTunes. That's where we read these reviews. It's where they are all gathered. And it's 5 stars. That means it is a perfect rating. And the person is absolutely positive with all the various adjectives used to describe iron culture, except they do note that not every episode is for them, meaning that it might not be of their interest, but nonetheless, they really enjoyed the sum total of iron culture. And I wouldn't say that this set Helms off, but for about 5 minutes, there was what I would describe as an outsider, and maybe iron culture listeners can chime in. It was a little bit of a spiral. And so, Trex, we brought you in not for your scientific expertise, but someone brought up in a previous review about a guided meditation led by Trex. And I think if you could help Helms out of this wilderness, this emptiness of the 5-star, but it's still not good enough because they're not interested in every single episode, we could be made whole again and we could begin this episode.
Yeah, I've got a number of meditation bowls presented behind me. After we record the episode, I will put a little ditty together for Helms and tune them up just right. And I think we should be able to take care of you.
I could also just download that background for my own, Google Meet, and then I have the same bowls in my virtual space as well. It's a good idea.
Correct. Yeah.
Helms, let me just say that you are a wild maverick because you're situated somewhere. You don't have to reveal your location. Your location is different, but you have 2 doors behind you, and it is the person that I am that I would never have my back turned to 2 doors behind me. But what a bold move. Is Paimon behind one? Is Draper behind the other? What's going on?
The good news is one is just a closet.
Okay.
So
Danny Len is not in that one, folks.
he's not in that one. Yeah. And I'm very comfortable being in closets as a bodybuilder who says he's straight. So I'm not worried. Closets don't scare me. Been in them a lot. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, good. So Eric's, I can now read the next. I'm glad we set that up. Trexler, thank you for your insight on that. We have 2 reviews. I do want to read them. One is positive, and I'm going to be serious for a second. And one is actually negative. So Helms, I'm going to let you pick. Do you want the actually negative review, or do you want to start with the actually positive? So there's no conflicting emotions. It's either it's a negative one or it's a positive one, and then folks, we can move on. What do you want, Helms? What door? What are the 2?
You know what? I think I'm going to go with the positive.
Good.
It's going to be hard to stay focused on that meditation if I expose myself to the fire right now.
I'm so glad you chose that. So this is actually directed, if individuals will remember, to Trexler. I wanted to save this one. So it is a 5-star review back just 2 weeks ago. It is Trex and the Art of Muscle Maintenance. And this individual said, a long-time listener and first-time commenter. I followed Trex over from the Enemy podcast, though throughout the years, I was always listening to Iron Culture as reconnaissance. The banter is incredible, and exercise, nutrition, science is always nuanced and well thought out. The only thing missing is more guided meditations from Trex. I love to listen to him guide Omar and Helms through a meditation or even a non-dual exercise. So this is like, this person's being serious. I have high hope that Omar may reach enlightenment immediately after hearing some wisdom from Trex, much like the old stories, and more seriously, as a meditator lifter that has other ambitions in life and has a family, how to manage the dissonance of a Buddhist idea of non-attachment and striving towards goals. I have never found a satisfactory answer, though it doesn't stop me from trying. That's Lover of Knowledge is the username from Australia. I thought that was cool. I wanted to make sure I read that to you, my man Trex.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it is difficult. The Buddhist concept of non-attachment is tough for people that are goal-oriented, but I think even harder is the Buddhist concept of aimlessness, which is almost completely antithetical to very focused goal striving. So I spent many a day sitting in a sauna, sweating it out, trying to kind of reconcile these different ideas in my head. And one of these days, perhaps I'll be prepared to share them publicly. But right now, I think they're too rough of a draft because it's tricky stuff, man.
Can we set an Iron Culture goal for when you'll figure out the aimlessness component to the?
Yeah, well, probably a SMART goal because we all know that's what all the evidence says is good. So SMART goal. Make sure that it's assignable and all that stuff. 6 months.
Yeah, I think if we strive towards that goal, we'll fully understand both aimlessness and non-attachment. So.
Yep.
Hey, can I be serious for 1 second before we go down in the dumps, Helms, and just say this is a celebration? I'm not sure, Trex, are you aware we're probably is it 4 or 5 months since you joined Iron Culture? I know we really should be aware of this, but I have no
idea.
Look. We've been going now for basically 5 years plus. So you feel very fresh. It doesn't matter if it's 4 months or 5 months. I'm like, wow, the whole first year, it's going to be Trextopia. So I just want to give you respect once again.
Oh,
and,
yeah,
we're very
I'm still the new
you.
guy. There's still that spark in the relationship. We're in the honeymoon period. It's great.
Honestly, you saved Omar in my marriage. People say what you will about thruples and non-conventional love, but for us, some people say, hey, you're about to get divorced. The last thing you should do is have a baby.
We threw that baby out with the bathwater, and then
that baby was thrown out with the bathwater, and then we got a vat-grown Eric Trexler and downloaded with just a perfect amount of background pop culture knowledge. So yeah, you know what? Maybe the issue is that they're conventionally conceiving these children.
Yeah,
and that we did it via that. So I just wanted to tip my hat. I not only have a deeper love and appreciation for you, Trexler, but also for you, Omar.
Whenever a relationship is getting complicated, the best option is to introduce another layer of complication.
Yes.
That usually takes care of everything.
Yeah. An extra variable for all the other variables to interact with. I will say I can't wait for in a few years when by necessity, this relationship, we need to introduce another new spark and we need to find a third Eric at that point. Hopefully they're out there. And if not, Helms, we grow them.
Well, you know what? I think we just offer Mike a certain amount of money to change his name, Eric Cerdos. He might go for it.
Yeah. I'm down with it. Okay, it's too positive. We have one more review. We're doing the Sheffield recap as well as talking about some supplements. Do we want you to react to this, or should I just go right to Trexler for the reaction? What do you think, champ?
Right? I have no idea what's coming here, but I know Helms lately, it does not take a lot to set him off. He's been a loose cannon, so I'll take this one.
When Eric said this anti-intellectualism, I got to speak on this, and he was very calm, well-measured, and he's like, I'm sorry if I'm ranting, guys. It's like, and no one's like, you're not ranting.
And I had a different set of standards for what ranting is.
Yeah.
For me, absolutely a rant.
Yeah.
I gave them both kind barrels.
Okay. Helms, I'm going to open up with some commentary after with this one, because I personally disagree, and I think it's related to the last episode. So it's from someone in Great Britain. Full Sturker is the username. Great username. It must be noted. It is 1 star. The review says, too verbose. It's a serious review. Too verbose for people with no friends. Seriously, look at Arnold's podcast and learn something. Think of the customer, in quotations, not your own virtue signaling. At least do shorts. I think they mean like reels and YouTube shorts in order to condense it down. But let me just say that I am actually diametrically opposed to this comment. Normally, like I hear the 1 star, it's like, oh, like either, oh, my, your jokes aren't funny. I'm like, fair enough. But this one, like other ones, I can understand. Some of them are like maybe we go on too long, or like we have a wide variety of different topics. Like, okay, fair enough. And this one, this is fundamentally what iron culture is about. And the deep dives, at least personally, and I think a large contingent of the iron culture listeners, they absolutely love, because you cannot find it anywhere else. And I find it interesting. This review was left after both of you, your duo episode, which I thought was one of the best episodes of like the last 6 months, personally, as someone who's interested in learning. So normally I don't get,
This came in after the episode when Helms was getting all red in the face and his veins were all bulged and he was talking about science.
It was the very recent one, the duo one with you, but it doesn't matter.
Fortunately, it was actually the one based upon the convergence of metabolic adaptation. Red.
Oh no, that was gold. That was the good stuff.
The one where we described it as you playing Sherlock, me playing Watson. I was second.
Oh, that one.
I was in the backseat. You spoke more, I spoke less.
We'll just email in and tell them that was a bad review. They'll take it down.
You might.
I'm a fan of that.
Yeah. But I do. Eric's, and we'll leave it at that, and then we'll kick it over to Sheffield. We do appreciate every single one of you for leaving a rating review, and it is one of the ways that we interact with the community, and we appreciate everyone that takes the time to leave reviews. I rarely will give some commentary as it's related to a negative review, but that one, personally, I do fundamentally disagree with.
Yeah, well, when I left it, I wasn't in a great place. So, no.
Well, I'm gonna lean on. You ever heard of the band Primus?
Yeah, 100. Yes, Primus sucks.
Yeah, so they released an album. It was like a best of, like their best hits album, and it was called "They Can't All Be Zingers." So I'll leave that with the 1-star review.
Yeah,
can't all be zingers.
On a serious note, I will say that we have episodes that are definitely for the lifter who loves science, and we have episodes for the lifter who loves lifting, and they don't always perfectly intersect. I guarantee you there's a small contingent who think our episode on Island Games is the best one we ever had, because they like Island Games. And I'm going back to that 5-star review that we had a couple weeks ago where we just got eviscerated. And I'm just saying, we can't be everything for everyone all the time, but we try our best. All right.
Helps. This has been great. I have to say, on a personal level, I really do think having, once again, Trexler on board and just the trio. So it's all the different ideas now being communicated. And I do think the diversity of topics, at least as someone who is an iron culture enthusiast, I think it's a new high. Yes, I'm heavily biased. Yes, we're moving on, Helms, to Sheffield. Why don't you, Kim? Hey, so I'll set it up for like a minute, and then I want you to kick things off. And then, Trex, I also want to give your thoughts about Sheffield. I will say, for those that remember last year, the infamous Sheffield Iron Culture trip. It wasn't only Sheffield. We went to Ireland. We did the lifting stones. We went to Solent University. So many different things happened. Helms was actually coaching an athlete, Jessica Bittner, there. It was the first time having the Sheffield, as it is known as, to be honest. And it was a very interesting event, to say the least, in a very positive way, I would say, where there was nothing like it before. This year, we were not attendees. We were spectators. I have many very positive things to say, but Helms, as someone who is actually up on that stage, shaking that thing, give me your thoughts, man.
Yeah. So those who will recall, we did an episode because we were there in person last year, and I described my main feeling as gratitude, because I had the opportunity to be part of what is truly an iconic moment in the changing, I would say, trajectory of powerlifting, to where it is more and more legitimate as a sport. And we were really excited about, man, if this is the inaugural Sheffield, imagine how good it's going to get when it's already setting such a high bar above anything that's ever come before. For those who have literally no idea what we're talking about, this is hosted by SBD in Sheffield, which is where SBD, the company that is probably the largest sponsor behind unequipped and IPF-based powerlifting, they supply a lot of the singlets, knee sleeves, belts, wrist straps to most of the national teams you'll see. and, pit out athletes. And they are hosting this huge money meet where literally hundreds of thousands of pounds, euros, dollars, your preference, is being given out to the 24 arguably best powerlifters in the IPF. It's an invitational meet. To even get into the meet, you have to be a world champion, or someone who placed second and then was within 95% of the world record, or someone from a regional nomination or a wild card. But in all cases, you must be within 95% of the potential world record. And that selection criteria starts with, the world champions ranked by how close to that they are. And people are rewarded not based upon dots, as our USAPL kind of contingent might think when you're comparing people across weight classes, not within weight class. For those who are more familiar with typical IPF, competitions, there's only 24, 12 women, 12 men, but actually by the percentage over the world record. And I think this is a really interesting way of doing it because it allows for a meta conversation around the development of powerlifting as a sport, both among men and women. Because in a sport, a weight class-based sport that is really, really well developed, you can essentially say that the best person in each weight class is roughly comparable to the others, with some acknowledgement that middleweights come from a larger populace in the world. So being the top dog in, say, the 83, the 93, 74, 105 categories in powerlifting is probably going to have a larger pool of population they're pulling from. So to some degree, it's not a perfectly fair comparison. But I will say that there were 3 men who actually broke the world record, and those are your top 3 out of the 12. 11 out of the 12 women broke the world record in the Sheffield. And this is the same story we saw last year, and it was the same story we saw at Worlds. So while female participation in strength sport is at an all-time high, and I've actually seen a number of regional powerlifting associations and weightlifting associations report that they had slightly more than 50% of their membership consist of women in some of their annual general meetings, which I've been privy to across multiple different regions in the world. I would say that we have not yet reached the peak of what that will result in. And we're going to start seeing, I think, my prediction, very, very meta, that when you account for skeletal muscle differences, we'll start to see some really similar totals. Like if you were to go down 3 or 4 weight classes from the men's to the women's equivalent, you're going to start seeing some similar things. And just what I think is one of the most incredible performances ever in powerlifting, the women's winner, Agata Sitko, she was the 76 kilo silver medal champion in the last 2 IPF Worlds. When I coached last year, Jessica Bittner got a bronze. Agata Sitko got silver, and Carlina got first in the 76 kilo class, and just kilos separating them. And then the year prior to that, Jessica Bittner tied Agata Sitko and was able to win on body weight. So Agata Sitko is, vying for that top world title. She dropped down to 69. Notably, she is a junior. She is very young. She's half my age. And at 69 kilos, dropping from 76, she had the highest total she's ever recorded in unequipped competition after a weight cut, including the fact that she is a bench specialist and that she was only able to record 1 bench press at Sheffield last year due to the new bench rule and her adapting to that. And cutting weight is notoriously something that impacts your bench. But she managed to put up a total that was a PB for her, and importantly, a new world record bench press, taking out none other than Jen Thompson's bench press record in the 69 kilo class, which has stood for a long time. She benched 154 at a body weight of 68.9 raw. She squatted 197.5 and she deadlifted 248.5, setting world records in the total, the bench, and the deadlift, and totaling 600 kilos at 69. And as someone who, if I go 8 for 9 on a meet at 93, that puts me right around a 600 total. That is mind-boggling to me, truly mind-boggling. Another interesting factor that kind of shows that I think the female side of the sport still has a lot more development to go, is the weight classes have recently changed. There's only been a few 76 kilo world champions because previously that was not one of the weight classes. There was one fewer weight classes. There was the 72s and there was the 66s, if I recall correctly. And I might be getting this, or 63. I'm going to mess it up. But now the current weight classes are 63, 69, 76, 84, 84 plus. There's an additional weight class thrown in there. So the 69 and the 76 kilo weight class are new, if you will. And those are the 69 kilo weight classes world record was actually lower than the 63, showing that, hey, you were still not seeing much development. So it's unsurprising that the top three at the Sheffield were the three that competed at 69. And that was Carola Gara, a world champion, Leah Bavois, a world champion, two different weight classes, one of them in 69, one of them in 63, both coming up to this, so they're eating up into it, and Agata Sitko eating down. And it was pretty damn impressive that the person cutting, not eating up, ended up taking it, and in pretty convincing fashion, totaling 600 with Leah Bavois totaling 585, which also just annihilated, I think the old record was 549. And then Carola Gara just 2.5 kilos behind that, 582.5. So truly annihilating these records. Agata Sitko got 109% of the 69 kilo world record at the age of, I think, 21, with just kind of insane numbers, really, greater than a 2 times body weight bench. So yeah, and it's not like a lightweight female class, where that sometimes is a little more explained by differences in body weight strength ratios, flexibility, et cetera, with the new IPF rules and after a weight cut. And it was something that truly floored me, and it made me realize, like, we're not at the peak yet. We're really not. So that's the first kind of meta conversation I think is worth having. And there were some huge upsets. There was a lot of surprising results, but I just wanted to start there, throw that to you guys and see what you think about the development of the sport, and on the women's side, just how crazy these performances are, truly.
Trexler. Then I'll...
Yes. And so you were putting your finger up there as if you had something big to say, not just to introduce me there.
I'll say it after, because I definitely have some thoughts, but I did see the eyebrows raised because you are familiar, and I think it's cool to be, will you describe yourself as, these days, with all the work you do, like every single thing, you're like a casual powerlifting fan, but you are definitely aware when Helm said, as example, Jen Thompson's bench record.
Yes. Yeah. When I hear that people are putting up numbers beating Jen Thompson's bench records, that's where my eyebrows do lift. That was a sincere reaction, because I remember a time where her numbers were, it wasn't just that she was killing it. I mean, there was such an enormous gap between her and the field. I mean, she was such an outlier with her bench press numbers that I kind of filed it away. It was like, well, she's, a freak of nature. Like, I probably won't see her records getting touched. In hindsight, that's naive, right? Because we know the sport's growing, like Helm said, so much more talent entering the sport. But still, I mean, I think to me, that was the one thing that jumped out and really caught my attention was, when you're beating Jen Thompson, you're really doing something, and Helms unfortunately reported all those lifts in some type of units that I don't understand or recognize. But when you tell me Jen Thompson's record, I know it's real.
It's got to be legit. Yeah, it's like,
later tonight I'll get out my calculator and try to figure out what the hell he was talking about.
Trexler's like,
but
yeah, go ahead.
It is worth saying that was her record in the 69 kilo class.
Yeah.
So that's not, which is in her like home weight class, just to be clear. She still has the bench press record single lift in the 63 kilo weight class, where she normally competes at 144.
Is anybody flirting with that? Anyone getting close?
Yes, absolutely. Carola Gara benched 143.5 not too long ago. So yeah, very close.
Now,
Carola Gara is also a monster bencher.
One thing I'll say, Trex, and then I'll kick it back over to you, Helms, is that, yeah, I think that is a good way to give context, however, because there were some very notable names. So another one, and maybe this will be a perfect segue talking about the men's, but like Ray Williams with his squat. When he squatted, Now I think it's like 6 years ago, is 2017 or 2018. Some of these lifts seem like they would not be touched for quite some time. And again, like 5-6 years is in any sport a considerable length of time. But Jen Thompson, as example, another thing that's very noteworthy would be her age when she set the record, and also her bench press style, which is still highly impressive, and to be that far ahead of the competition. But to Helms's point, like even I'll give a shout out because Ben Escrow, Hammering Hank himself, is the coach of Aaliyah Bavois. She had the meet of her, like the exact meet she wanted. I read her post-meet recap. I know it. Ben was saying, and she had a phenomenal meet where she broke the record, the 69, and it wasn't enough once again because Agata came out there, guns a-blazing, and it's a testament to the potential development of all powerlifting, women's powerlifting in particular, as there are more participants. And I think I want to know one thing quickly before, Helms, you jump over to the men's side. And that is, I like the camaraderie. Like, one of my favorite moments of the last several years was when, shout out to the unit, Jessica Bittner, when she was going for her last deadlift, and Agata was there in the audience cheering her on, even though it meant that if Jessica got that deadlift, she would beat Agata. And last Sheffield, after that Sheffield, where both of them competed there, we were all together. Like, there's so many people that competed, just hanging out and whatnot. And there was an impromptu push-up competition at 2 a.m. between Jessica and Agata. Very friendly, very friendly. I won't give any more of the details. I saw that there's some other person there that got knocked out that wasn't related to us. It was 2 a.m. in Sheffield. That's what happens. But just once again, a testament to the overall feelings and the sentiments of the lifters towards one another, I think is just really cool.
If I could jump in with a cliche, I mean, I know how much people cringe when they hear this, but based on what I'm hearing in terms of how you get invited to the Sheffield, the old cliche, we're all winners, right? I mean, you can't really go there and lose, can you? Like, I mean, everyone there is like absolute top tier, best in the world. So I can see how it would lend itself to that kind of spirit of camaraderie. It could go the other way. It could become a toxic, hyper competitive mess. But I'm glad to hear that that's kind of the vibe they've got going.
Speaking of which, the male side, no, I'm just joking. Helms, take that because I have some thoughts, but I want you to roll through like your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, I think I misspoke a little bit when I was describing the weight classes and snuck one of the men's weight classes in there. But the old weight classes, just so we're clear, and I can't handle when I make a mistake, realize it, and don't correct it, were 63, 72, 84. And the 84 and 63 are still there. But what they did was they added 69 and 76. So there was a bunch of women after the weight class change a few years back who were going, oh, should I go up from 72 to 76 or should I go down from 72 to 69? And the weight classes that were like the 69 kilo world record was the lowest comparatively in the field. The 76 was actually pretty impressive due to Carolina Tongotia totaling 600 at Commonwealths, where I was coaching end of 2022, which got her into Sheffield. And she broke that world record at both totaling 610. So like you're seeing both these weight classes records going up a good bit. But yeah, Carola Gara won the 63 kilo class. Leah Bavois won the 69 kilo weight class and at Worlds. And then in the 76 kilo class, Agata Sitko narrowly lost to Carolina Tongotia in the 76s and dropped down to 69 for a little context that is accurate. And the 69s were the top three spots because of that weak world record. And then after that, you had, a lot of, like you said, Eric, everyone in this competition is arguably one of the best lifters in the world, and it is very challenging to really compare people. Like if you were to put them based upon good lift points or dots or your preferred thing, it would come out differently than the world records. But this is a cool meet where it rewards trying to push the limits of the sport, which I think is really, really cool. So anyway, with that said, on the men's side, for those who don't listen to King of the Lifts, if you're a powerlifting fan, especially an IPF powerlifting fan, you don't listen to King of the Lifts, I highly recommend it. Ryan Lapidat, he is the perennial host, and then he has kind of like Iron Culture. He is at the top of the pyramid, but he has this massively populated kind of second tier, and I'm very privileged and honored to be one of them, along with, say, Matt Gary, Rory Lynch, Joe Whiteley, Amelia Potter, and many of those people are very experienced coaches in the powerlifting space, or they're actually commentators. So, for example, Joe Whiteley is often the second commentator for the biggest competitions, along with Ryan, and the two of them are great. She's awesome. She also is part of the team that runs Open Powerlifting. Amelia Potter, she's a sports performance psychologist. She's great. She does a lot of commentary. I had the privilege of doing a little bit of commentating on Worlds and just seeing how much goes into that, how good they are. And then, of course, Rory Lynch, very good New Zealand coach. Matt Gary, probably the most experienced coach at the highest level, still kicking it around and kind of like the true grandfather right now and mentor to everybody, and someone who really inspired me. So I get to kind of hang out with them, and we talk powerlifting shop, and our predictions, all three of us had Jesus Olivares, even on a bad day, winning the Sheffield. And unfortunately, he had a probably worse than a bad day, I would say, and upset all of our predictions. For the women's, we were pretty close. Like, we all had a 69 kilo lifter winning, and then there was just the degree that we thought the other lifters were close. I was thinking Natalie Richards might be able to, despite the fact that her weight classes records weren't quite, as easy to attain, but just she'd come on the scene. She won best lifter at World. I thought she would be actually second. And then there'd be a gap between the other 69s. And who I thought was going to blow it away was Carola Gara, because I saw her on the rise. And it's hard to predict because Carola Gara, Leah Bavois, and Agata Sitko blew the roll hunters out of the water. So it was, I think, a fair choice. And I think it's only Rory who predicted the right 69 in the top of that pile. But we got the women semi-right. Like, we kind of got people in kind of the right places, but small differences can change things. But man, all three of us did not pick the fact that Jesus would not only not win, but actually came in 11th, believe it or not. And the thing about being a super heavy is there are big jumps between your lifts. And he made a 20 kilo jump on bench press and ended up getting stuck with something far lower than what his capacities might have been on that day. And that went on to kind of hurt him as he went forward. But he did make the iconic move to break the world record in the squat. This is the, 478.5 kilo squat, which is humongous. It is not the heaviest squat ever done in an IPF affiliate's record. It's not heavier than the heaviest one that Ray Williams has ever done. But Ray, I believe, did that at the Arnold, which at the time was not counted as a world record, unfortunately. But so Ray Williams is still holding on to that iconic aspect. And there was some thoughts that if Jesus really blew his second attempt out of the water, that he would actually try for a 500 kilo squat, which would be pure insanity. Unfortunately, we were not graced by that occurrence. But we did see some pretty impressive performances. Jonathan Keiko locked up second place again, which was pretty cool. And then a surprise kind of, no one really picked him out of the pile. The 93s, like I mentioned earlier, when you talk about kind of the peak of the bell curve, that's probably our perennial middleweight division these days, now that powerlifting is fully fleshed out. Obviously, it's heavier than the average middleweight in other sports, but this is powerlifting. These are muscle-bound men we're talking about, right? So there was a big battle in 93s. Gavin Aiden, really proud of him. He successfully got the squat world record, which is something that he had got multiple times and then got overturned by the jury because he's right on the line with depth. This time he was able to secure that, which was really cool. Jonathan Keiko, had a fantastic performance. And Gustav Hedlund just happened to be stronger on the day, made enough lifts. The Swedish coaching team is very well known. And this has kind of been something that's been a long time coming for him. He's been a perennial competitor, but never quite winning. I don't think he's won a world title. I think he has won a European title, but he came out on top of the pile. Gustav Hedlund was, right there. And then the other really surprising thing was that our very own Delaney Wallace, who Alberto Nunez does his nutrition, he works with Team Flex for his training. He was injured literally most of his prep and just kind of fingers crossed right at the last minute, hoping on some of these motor patterns with light loads to stay in place while focusing on, hey, look, if I can't recover, if I can't squat 120, then why am I trying to push the envelope? Let's really focus on recovery. Everyone had more or less counted him out and said, look, he's hurt. And he's probably not going to do that well. He ended up placing third. So Delaney got on the podium, and broke Russ Orhey's world record. Something that he was literally just one pull away from, 2.5 kilos away from, if I recall correctly, or maybe 5 kilos, something like that. But his last pull, which he almost got in the Sheffield last year to break that world record, and he actually broke the 83 kilo world record. And the timing is great because Russ Orhey has announced that he's coming over to the IPF. We've got a whole bunch of USA bill lifters who are coming over to the IPF, and the men's division is going to get quite exciting. Every single one of those kind of middleweight divisions, there are just stacked killers coming out of just the US alone sometimes. And then you have these people like Gustav Hedlund out of other places. So yeah, Battle of the 93s between Gustav, Gavin, and Jonathan Keiko. Very interesting. Unexpected comeback performance from Delaney. A surprising fall from being the like kind of shoe-in favorite by Jesus after winning and totaling more than anyone ever has in powerlifting, period, and becoming solidified as the strongest man alive. So it was disappointing. I don't think anybody wanted to see Jesus not perform at his best. So I know Omar, you have a good relationship with Jesus, and we did some great interviews with him, and he's a rascal athlete. I'd be curious to get your take on that, and if you've had opportunity to talk to him. But yeah, it was cool. There's a lot of storylines. Timothy Monagatti, for example, his battle in the 74s with the current world champ, Kalle Johansson, also from Sweden, and Tim was previously an 83 who dropped down. Here's another discussion point. We'll step away from the actual results and go meta. And this is something now we're seeing on the men's side, which I think is more developed. Now we're starting, so I mentioned earlier, women's side still being developed, just patience there, but their peak has not been reached yet. On the men's side, I actually do think we are seeing what the sport will look like in terms of trends long-term. It'll get nudged up, but we're not going to see these monumental leaps like we have in the last 10 years on the men's side. Like I said, 3 men broke world records, and it was by marginal amounts. There was no 109% of the world record like there was in the women's. It was like 101%, right? At most. What we're seeing now on the men's side is that you kind of have to cross every T, got to cross every F. If it's lowercase, got to dot every I, and you got to dot every lowercase J now. And like when you look at weightlifting, which has been around longer, and especially from countries where it's a little more rewarded and culturally appreciated, say Eastern Bloc countries, and they're not competing with, say, basketball or American football, et cetera. They've got, I'm thinking China specifically, they've got national champions deep who could be an Olympian. And it's like, who gets to go get a gold medal? And you see similar characteristics in it. The sport is selecting for what needs to be in place for someone to have all the ideal things to be strongest. And something that actually was not the case in some old research in powerlifting about 5-6 years ago that Greg wrote about in Mass. But I do think what you'd see now is that in weightlifting, you tend to see in the non-super heavy class. So basically your non-unlimited class on the men's and the women's side, very similar physiques differing by height in Olympic weightlifting, right? And typically people are reasonably lean. They're not shredded, but just like you see in sprinting, just like you see in pole vault, just like you see in any event in track and field where you benefit from a high strength or power to weight ratio, people who are doing pretty good at training and recovering at low body fat percentages, kind of rising to the top, you're starting to see that in powerlifting now as well. There is a very definite kind of like, wow, these guys are muscular and pretty lean. And that's no surprise to me that we're seeing 2 years in a row on the women's side, someone cut down from their traditional weight class and win Sheffield. And now we're also seeing people like Tim Monagatti do that in the 74s. And we're seeing people either cutting a lot of weight to make weight, like a Gavin Aiden, or we're seeing people who have to cut weight and are walking around very lean. So I think we're now at this point where there is not just one freak. You don't just get to be that guy. And you kind of have to be that guy and also have a whole suite of people around you. You know, when you look at NCAA Division I athletics, or when you look at professional sport, or when you look at Olympic sport and well-developed programs, your athletes, especially in individual sports, are going to have a physiotherapist. They're going to have a sports dietitian. They're going to have their coach. If that's a non-power strength-based sport, they'll also have a strength conditioning coach. They might have a position-based coach if it's a team sport. They have basically a pit crew around them. And that is actually very common now at the elite level in powerlifting. And I'm a part of some of those teams, you know. I have served as the nutritionist alongside the lifter, the person actually doing the lifting. And I've also had dietitians work with my athletes when I do all the rest of their coaching at times, and mental skills coaches. So actual sports psychologists. And that is something that they're able to be a powerlifting sports psychologist and have a full-time job that pays their bills these days. So just kind of think about that, where powerlifting is, that there is a fully fleshed out sporting industry supporting athletes now. And yeah, just being farm strong is probably not going to be enough these days to get you that title. So anyway, that's kind of the big meta conversation on the men's side. What does being a fully developed sport on the men's side mean? And then what does it mean on the women's side, and where we're going to go? And I think in both cases, it's quite exciting because you have these nail biters in both cases, but the nail biters in the women's are advancing the whole sport. Each year that the competition goes, we said the heaviest deadlift done in IPF history. Or this time we saw Sonita do the heaviest squat, the first 300 kilos squat by a woman in the IPF. Insanity, you know. So it's crazy. We've got over 2 times body weight bench presses by women in middleweight classes. We have squats over 300 kilos, and we're soon to see the first 600-pound deadlift in IPF history among women as well. I think the heaviest deadlift right now is only 4 or 5 kilos shy of that. So that's what's going on in the women's. And then in the men's, it's just like, you just cannot miss. You can't make a mistake. You have to be perfect, and you have to set yourself up for success years in advance. Yeah, as someone who is just interested in the history of sport and is fortunately and very privileged to be intimately involved in it, it's pretty cool to see. And I do have a fair amount of, it's not FOMO if you actually weren't there. It's just, I missed out. What is that called? Just mow? I just mowed it. I really wish I'd been there, but I wasn't coaching at Sheffield this year. So it was really cool to watch on the stream. Had a lot of people watching it. I do think SBD leveled up. They sold out the venue. It looked incredible. And hats off to everybody involved. It was a really, really cool event.
Eric, well said. Folks, if you notice Trexler yawning, it's because the non-alcoholic beer be hitting. I have a funny aside. Helms is my guy, and I want to kick it over to Trex. That almost reminded me when I say, yeah, we'll go 40 minutes on the stuff. It's like, that's already the 40 minutes. I knew it might be the whole episode, but also I want to make sure we do get to stuff where Trex, this is the Holy Triumphant on for it. But I will say, Helms, it does remind me of one time we filmed the video. You'll find this funny, Trex, when we're doing the documentary. And I said, Eric, so tell me about yourself. Who are you? And it's a video on how to get shredded. And after, when I was reviewing the video, Eric did a 9-minute intro on himself. And then it was 8 minutes about the topic. And then the kid Joseph, because he gives the cues, it usually is 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And he's just Eric's right, so 3DMJ, and what were you trying to do at 3DMJ? He's you don't understand. And then after Joseph Major, Eric said, I want to get it right. So I think it's very important. And one thing I see absolutely is the passion. I do have some brief thoughts because I want to make sure that we get to the next topic. But Trexler, for you, some of the things you heard, maybe the Ray Williams squat, where that was really, and I brought this up before, but I think that was a cultural touchstone in powerlifting where it was shared on the news. I'm not sure if Jesus, when he didn't break the all-time tested a squat, but he did in a world setting, or however you classify it, right?
Correct. So he broke the 120 plus world record, which was at 478, but that's not the most that has been done, which is I think 490 by Ray.
Yeah. And so that moment when Ray Williams did it really kind of put natural powerlifting on the map for the greater kind of industry. And I remember, how many people were giving commentary about it, how legendary it was. Anything notable, Trex, from you, from anything that we covered just before I give some side ending commentary, and then we will move on?
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, it's very clear. I'm like a time capsule for powerlifting. For me, there was a time period there where I recognized all the names. I was following it relatively closely. I knew who all the big hitters were, right? And it's really surprising to me, that I feel like I just blinked, and all of a sudden I really don't recognize the vast majority of the names in the sport. Like the folks who I used to think of as being kind of the top dogs, it's like things are moving so quickly in the sport that, all of a sudden there's this whole new batch of names. But when I hear names like Jen Thompson and Ray Williams, that kind of takes me back to that period where I really did know the names of all the folks who were kind of setting the records. And yeah, it's crazy. I mean, when Ray Williams was doing his thing, I remember, aside from all the stuff on like the lay press popular news sites, there was as someone who spends more time than most on PubMed, there was a case report about his body composition that caused all sorts of heated debate about, how well you can measure Ray Williams' body fat with ultrasound. An interesting debate there if you're into ultrasound, which I very much am. But no, I mean, to start hearing these names like Jen Thompson and Ray Williams and hearing about their lifts getting, people getting close or maybe even, passing them in some context. Because Omar, I know this confused you a little bit, but there's, the heaviest lift that's ever been done and seen, but then there's the official records. Like when I held the official USAPL state squat record for 2 weeks in Ohio, I'm sure, well, no, probably not. I don't think anyone in Ohio was squatting 500 the way I was squatting 500. But even if they had, they didn't have the record. I did, because I did it at a high enough level meet with qualified judges. And that's the difference, Omar, just so you don't get confused again.
So I think, gents, what I want to do, I am going to go on a tangent, but it's a good one. And then we'll go back to the Sheffield recap and we'll see, Helms, what we covered today, because this is a great theoretical question for maybe both of you. You did say, Trex, you enjoy like the research on ultrasounds and so on and so forth. So I don't think this is like sharing any private information, but I do know, shout out to fellow iron culture enthusiast, Dr. Pack, where we are bringing Grizzly Kyriakos to the Arnold. But part of that journey, he's making a pit stop, Trexler, to the UK. And one of the things Pack hopes for, we'll see if it happens, like jet lag, all those sorts of things. Grizzly, to give some context, I think he's 5'10", 5'11". He's about 440 pounds. He did tell me he was cutting 9 kgs. So he might be 422 pounds instead. But he's somewhere along that lines. He is a quite massive individual, a good amount of muscle mass. But just with that amount of body weight and the overall volume being taken up, ultrasound, Pack said it'd be fun to try and evaluate either his total amount of muscle mass, so on and so forth. What limitations would present itself when you try and measure someone of that size? Because Ray Williams he's huge. He's like 6'1" or 6'2", and he's high 300s. Like Grizzly is just volume-wise relative to his height. He's like considerably wider, and I will say, I think, let's wait for the results, a little bit higher body fat. But anyways, just like in terms of measuring, just hunks of that magnitude, like just give me a little bit of commentary, please.
So the challenge there, so ultrasound can be used to measure body fat. I've done it myself in my old lab. We would use A mode, we would use B mode ultrasound. So hopefully they're using B mode. I think with A mode ultrasound, from what I'm hearing, I don't think you're going to get a number you can do anything with, to be completely honest. But B mode is kind of the standard ultrasound. And you should be...
Real quick, can you explain to the audience the difference between A mode and B mode? Because I think when most people think ultrasound, they just think of the image rather than...
Yeah. So if you're thinking of the image, you're thinking of B mode, right? So A mode is amplitude mode, which usually, like, the only ones I've ever seen are you literally plug them into the USB of a laptop and you have a probe, and instead of looking at an image of the muscle, you're looking at literal amplitudes, right? Like little waves up and down. B mode is for brightness mode, and that's where you see the classic black and white image that you're used to seeing. So almost everyone uses B mode, but A mode is kind of selectively used for body composition because it's cheaper, it's portable, and if the thickness of the subcutaneous adipose layer is thin enough, then you can usually get a pretty clear amplitude and say, okay, yeah, we got this many millimeters that we're seeing there. So assuming that they would be targeting brightness mode or B mode ultrasound, they should be able, with a decent probe, to get, totally adequate penetration depth to get a good image where you can measure the thickness of that adipose layer. And it's the same exact thing as what we're doing with calipers, like for skin fold. All you're trying to do there is measure how thick is that adipose layer between the skin and that structure deep, kind of below the adipose tissue, usually muscle, depending on where you're looking. So that shouldn't be a problem getting an image, but the problem is when you are working with folks who are legitimate outliers in terms of body composition, when we get these thickness measurements, all we're doing is plugging them into normative equations if we're trying to get a body fat percentage value. And I can tell you what, based on the dimensions you've described to me, that person was not in the sample that was used to derive these normative equations. And so you can get a perfectly accurate thickness measurement of the subcutaneous fat layer, but can you really get a good, valid, legit body fat percentage when you plug that into an equation? That's where things get a little messy. And so, for example, the paper with Ray Williams, the equation that they used was based on a reference population that had nowhere. The body composition characteristics weren't anything remotely close to Ray Williams, which then calls into question the validity of the calculated number. So you can get a lot of really cool insights from those ultrasound scans, those ultrasound images and the thicknesses they reveal. But can you get a really good body fat number to hang your hat on? Probably not. You'd probably be better off maybe with a DEXA. But then, I tell you what, there's no way he fits in a DEXA scan. You have to do what you do with DEXA. When people start getting, whether they're like over 6'4" and just kind of broad, or you start getting, 350, 400 pounds. First of all, some tables, well, all tables I've ever seen have a weight limit. And I don't know. The heaviest table I've ever used had a weight limit of 400. And even if you are under the weight limit, it's kind of a narrow field of scan where there's a technique where you scan half the body and then you kind of assume that the other half is the mirrored image, basically. If you're more than like 6'3" or 6'4", usually half your foot is hanging off the table. Sounds like that wouldn't be an issue at 5'10", but all that is to say, like body composition, a lot of folks think it's as simple as, just hop in the bod pod, lay on the DEXA, And there's really a lot more limitations that you have to kind of work around. And sometimes the number isn't really as simple as you think.
We're with our very own Connor Heffernan. I won't give too much information because it's still in the works, but it's a potential grant application that is across multiple labs, multidisciplinary, that Connor is looking at related to questioning what is strength and getting a better understanding of it from a lot of different fields. And I am really excited to hopefully going after that and doing some work here at AUT with Connor. He's looking at obviously more historical lens, sociological lens. And then one of the aspects of it that I thought would be really interesting would be to try to really delineate our understanding of how strength athletes differ. Trex, I know you're aware of this paper. And it was, I want to say, because we probably used it for some of the papers we've written together, 2011, I want to say led by Slater, nutrition guidelines for sprinting, throwing, and bodybuilding and weightlifting. You and I immediately, we think about that. And it made sense in 2011. Strength athletes, power athletes, bodybuilders, same thing, right? Nutrition should be the same. And we're actually looking at some weight class based athletes, some who don't, some who do a lot more volume, some who do far less, some who have to cut weight and get shredded, right? Some who would actually not want to maximize the hypertrophy, but just get as strong as they can for their given hypertrophy. So anyway, or they're given anthropometry. So that tells you kind of from a historical lens, which you've talked about before, Trex, like exercise physiology, sports science, they really did start with like cycling, and heart health and things like that. And it was not that long ago that strength athletes were painted with a very broad brush. And it wasn't that long before that where they were just non-existent in the literature at all, except to say, you probably shouldn't do this. It's going to make your heart unhealthy, not understanding left ventricular hypertrophy and stuff like that. So one thing that I thought would be quite interesting would be, hey, what if we really started to look at elite level athletes in these different strength sports and see how they differ? Because I think at a high enough level, when you have the sport well developed, like I was talking about, you'll see some different anthropometric characteristics. And Connor was like, well, I'm pretty tight with Jen Todd. I'm really connected to some of the world's strongest men. He's like, it'd be great to get like DEXA for, Hafthor Bjornsson. Like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. There's no point.
No, like we can measure certain things, but exactly what you're saying, even though we're dealing with the obesity epidemic, like tables have gotten bigger for DEXA. They have things to, deal with people with like class 3 obesity, but there's a difference between your typical American who is, tallish, who is that heavy, and then someone who is 6'8", 450,
I shook that man's hand, and I can tell you that if you do a dex on him, you're cutting that off mid shin. Like, there's no chance.
No chance. And I mean, God, Brian Shaw, no dex in the world fits that man. Absolutely not.
No. I had heard that a lab was doing some interesting stuff with like really high level strongmen. I need to check the literature to see if that ever got published. It's got to be kicking around somewhere, but I'll have to check back in on that.
But there's other stuff, 3D scanner. That's something that could potentially work as long as a wide enough scanning field. My trip with Omar down to Grant Tinsley's lab, there's a lot of other options, high quality, multi-frequency BIA or BIS, and then plugging in these multiple things together to get multi-compartment models, or just reporting raw skin folds. I think people don't yet appreciate how useful and valid and reliable that data is. They want to always see a body fat percentage, but
honestly, not to sound like a dinosaur here, but good old fashioned underwater weighing might be a good option for folks with really large stature and really high body masses.
We would just need to get a one big pool that most people with eardrums would pop if they went deep enough to measure half Thor. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I mean, people, it's like out of sight, out of mind because it's so old school. But for this particular set of constraints, it actually might be a really nice option. The one thing nobody knows about underwater weighing, though, like some inside baseball here, it's basically simulated drowning. It's not a fun experience. You need to get all the air out of the lungs while they're underwater to get their true underwater weight without all the buoyancy of an inflated lung. And it's like, honestly, for some folks, like a borderline traumatizing experience. So I see why we away from it, but like, Archimedes' principle is actually legit.
Yeah, not for the claustrophobic by any means.
I will say, so a few things. I find this very interesting, and then we will go back to the Sheffield recap. One, I think that would be a very notable meme, Trex, if Kyriakos was to go to the lab and then the reading just said, so the meme is that when he steps on the scale, it says, oh, it's full. If he does the same thing when they try and evaluate his body mass, his muscle mass, and so on and so forth, if it said full. Another interesting note, and I want to kick over a question to Helms, is that like Grizzly, he's quite the character. He's very interesting. But he'll sometimes have the captions just his face and he'll say paranoid. Can you imagine trying to convince this person to go down to the bottom of a pool, exhale all his air out, and just trying to convince him, and also like Pac trying to explain to him in Greek, like this is for the greater good of like science, and we're just very curious like how that would go,
For one, you tell him it's for the difficult, and I think we'd have a chance of getting him in.
Yeah.
But two, if you guys remember, actually Trex, sorry, you weren't. I don't think you were on that one, but Panna, we had by the way, who won the 74 kilo battle at Sheffield. Excellent job.
66.
Yep, 66. I always do that. 66 kilo battle. Excellent performance. Beat out Kyoto. But Panna was talking about how when he went to go meet up with Kyriakos, and he had to call him and say, hey, we're driving a long way. There's traffic. We're going to be a little late, and like by 30 minutes or something like that. And Grizzly was like, like started like cussing really loud and like kind of losing his mind for a little bit. So yeah, I think he has strong emotional responses to things. Like he's been memed, but he is not a meme. Many of his responses and his like how he just will sometimes yell in training, those are very genuine to his personality and how he feels in the moment. So I'm not going to be the one to ask him to dunk his head underwater and expel all of his lungs out. I'll tell you that much.
It would be, I would say, and that's why one of the goals, obviously, with the trip bringing him over is to authentically tell his story, perfectly translated, because he is, and to your point, just a meme. It would be epic if he let out a bellow at the bottom of the pool, though, like he does his yell. But the question for Trex, for Helms, and then we'll go back to the Sheffield recap. Someone who has expressed interest, and both of you would find this probably interesting, much like Ray Williams. I don't know if once again on DEXA he would be able to be there, but Jesus, when I spoke to him and I was talking, because he asked me about the body fat, he saw the video with like Grant Tinsley, and just for his own curiosity, because how many individuals do you know are like 5'11", 6 feet, high 300, so he's approaching 400 pounds, but I have shook both his hand, half Thor's, Ray Williams. He is a well-muscled lad, okay? Like when you feel his shoulder, there's a lot of muscle mass there. So I think just as a case study too, it could be interesting. Helms, based upon what you know as it relates to Jesus, his overall size, is it feasible, or is it's once again at that point, he's at the cusp, or is it at the point you think where you can get some measurements? I'm thinking of the table of the desk, like it's very tricky, but to me, it's borderline. Where's Grizzlies like a no in my head?
Yeah, let me take a look at what his official weigh-in was at Sheffield.
Yeah.
And tell you. So let's see. Jesus was his official weigh-in at Sheffield.
He wanted to go to Grant Tinsley's in Lubbock. So
186.7 kilograms.
No, okay.
So that is over 400 pounds by, a good 10 pounds.
Yep.
And I like
but like a weight limit on a DEXA, it's like the expiration date on milk, right? It's like
break this $30,000 machine.
Just set up the buy date. You're fine.
Yeah. So 410 is, you round it to 400. I think with I'm assuming, because I've seen a power lifter or two, I assume he's not over like 6'3".
No.
One thing he's like 6'2", right?
I think he's like 6 or 6'1" max. Like he just looks so imposing, is what he's, I don't know.
And next to you, right? How much taller than me is he? Because I'm dead on 6'4".
Bro, I don't think, you're a legit 6. I think you guys are closer to, I think you're within an inch.
Yeah, I think maybe he's 6'1".
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but with power lifters, the problem is they are, and I say this with great reverence and respect, they're built like cubes. They're wide and they're thick front to back. So I think, it's not a problem to do the technique I said, where you just measure half of their body and just kind of flip the mirror image for the other half, estimate it. But I would imagine almost certainly you'd have to do that with any power lifter who's weighing in that high. Their shoulders are so broad that, we used to do a lot of measurements on even retired, people that they were former professional football players, but they had been out of the league for, in some cases, decades, and they're still just broad dudes, right? And so it's really tough to get their shoulders in there. But it'd be so funny though. We bring in basketball players who are 6'8" and be like, yeah, we'll get you from the knee up. We'll bring in these, huge football players who we're like, all right, we'll do the left half and guess the right. And then we bring in the gymnasts who are like 4'11", 103 pounds. We'd be like, just lay anywhere you want on the table. I'm sure it'll be fine. Yeah. That's the crazy thing about sport though. There are so many ways to be an elite athlete, and neither option's more impressive than the other, but it's just incredible, the diversity of body shape and body size that's just killing it athletically.
Yep. No, Helm. So we'll segue back now to Sheffield, and maybe we'll wrap up with that, because I do want to hear, Helms, your closing thoughts. I thought there's many insightful points, and one of them, to kick it off, actually, now that we're talking about Jesus, inside information, because once again, the lad's going to the Rascal Arnold booth, where he's going to be there with Kyriakos. So I had like an hour talk with him, and one of the things that was actually interesting, speaking about the male side, everything you said, I thought there were some really great points. There's a level of competition, how deep it runs. Would be that for someone like Jesus, the way he was explaining it when I spoke with him, because he is a super heavyweight, and those jumps, he said how it feels on his body, as an example, the deadlift, the very final deadlift. So, he set a squat record that went well, but he said the thing that was notable, the Sheffield, and he's going to release a video and so forth. So I'm paraphrasing it. I'm not trying to speak for him, but as I understand it, once again, because these are massive swings. He experienced some cramping, which he had never really experienced before. And that's why, if you notice on the live stream on all the deadlifts, like I try to take a photo because it reminded me of this great meme, a weightlifting meme of Chinggis leaning. This weightlifter called Chinggis that was like leaning always on things. Where like Jesus was like here, just like waiting to go out. And at first I thought he was putting out the vibe, but he said, no, my hands were actually swelling up immediately after squats. And so something he hadn't experienced before, being a super heavyweight where he doesn't cut. And so he said that the reason why he made the 20 kg jump for bench press is that for him, calculated as a percentage, well, it seems like a huge jump, that it doesn't feel that way when his body performs and when he has to do it. And that at some, once again, theoretical amount, like 1,000 pounds, no matter what, even if I'm making up the number here, like 1,000 pounds is 95%. His 95% in an absolute sense, like 1,000 pounds can kill you. You know, like 500 pounds, like not to get morbid, but just the absolute load, what it does on your body, the amount of things you have to get right. And so when something small is off, it could really affect everything else. He only knew it after he did the 255. So anyways, he tried 275, and then on the third one, he got it, but then he racked it early. And I had to say,
that's unfortunate.
yeah, and just with the competitor that he is, first one, he did have previously grip issues. He felt like he solved it, but again, the cramping, the hands, that's why he was like always holding the top. His mentality, which I told him, like just on a personal note, I greatly respect. He either wants to be the champion, like go out on a shield, as he said. He wasn't interested because he could have been more conservative anyways after the bench press, and he could have taken smaller jumps on the deadlift and like maybe ended up within like top 7 or 8, like for sure, like not 11th, certainly if he played it safe after bench press. But with the way he was, that's why his third deadlift, he went for 429 kgs, and he told me that he hit before somewhere else 426. And when Joey Flex was explaining it to him, it's like, okay, he was thinking of 410. He's like, well, if we do 420, that was before, the other lifters, the 93 kgs kind of kept pushing up the total. And they said, well, if you do 9 more kilograms, like 429, you could win this whole thing. And again, Jesus stated, like at that level and at that amount of weight where we're talking like 900 plus pounds, the difference between what sounds like a huge jump, especially if, let's say, your deadlift is like from 250 to 259, from his vantage point, it's all relative, and that he much rather have taken that chance. So anyways, all that to say, I found that interesting, maybe to your point, Helms, that to compete at this level, and as a super heavyweight where he set the all-time record, tested or untested, that you have to take these swings, and if it doesn't work out, then the placing is so competitive. That's what happens. And I can't help but wonder that when this new talent, I hear there's a certain lifter, not the rascal athlete, I'm just joking, but Austin Perkins, that's going to go over to Sheffield. Many other notable lifters, like Russell Orhe, where he announced it. I want to see another thing I want to note, and I'll try and keep this as brief as possible. I love the regional invites. On a personal note, want to give a shout out to my Guyanese man, Carlos, who actually placed, I think, like top 7, represented himself very well. Where, last year's example, there was an Algerian lifter. And sometimes we hear like regional invite, it's like, okay, like people can say, I've heard some, not commentary, like how competitive, like so on and so forth. But oftentimes what you'll see, as is the case with Carlos, relative to the overall rankings, he did really well. So I like the idea in my head of a world games with this is like champion meets champion. So the best of the best that really has that world quality to it. So it's many different nationalities competing. And I do think for some of those nations, to your point, Eric, when there is that incentive, like when you have a hometown hero, so when you have someone like, let's say, from Guyana that made it to the highest level, there's then more incentive to set something up on a national level, or even, this is separate, but like Rondell, I know, so a Trinidadian lifter, like him, like potentially like many different things, many different lifters from other nations. I think you'll see a whole host of new talent rising through. So I really think that is just a noteworthy thing to leave a little commentary on, the way that SBD did it. So I really like that. The male side, also the hometown, we joke the heroes. We have some from Great Britain, but also the crowd favorites, right? So Pana, as an example, some of the loudest. It's hard to hear. Ryan Lapidat did a fantastic, and all the commentary, like fantastic job. But he was giving a lot of great context, because I do think overall the meet was rained. It already was at a high level. It was even better. But from a spectator standpoint, so you have all these now different nationalities. You have some of these crowd favorites. So you have Pana as an example coming out. He hit the 290 kg deadlift. But then you have Ryan Lapidat, because the numbers on the screen, and they did a solid job, obviously displaying everything. But he's letting you know, like, if he does this, this means, or with Gustav, where he said this is his previous best deadlift, and it seemed like when Jonathan Keiko, and that's where some of the drama and the excitement, it all comes down to the last deadlift, when Jonathan hit his third deadlift, Trex, and he made it, and he was then in the leader position, and then it was up to Gustav, and Gustav had to deadlift the weight I believe that he had not hit before, and not that there's any doubt by other people, but it's like, well, this is like a serious PB for him to hit. Then the crowd understood, okay, is he going to get this? Rather than just, number being on the board, like here's his previous best, here's what he's going for. And so I think the commentary team, in addition to all the displays, all the graphics, it all came together and it was more seamless in terms of understanding it. So you have many different points to celebrate but from a spectator standpoint, and even like, man, let's crunch some of the numbers here. I forget what the highest amount of concurrent viewers were last year, but it certainly wasn't the same as this year. This year was more. It was, I think at some point it exceeded 30,000. I'm not sure the exact, but I know it was more. So that's also fantastic in terms of people attending. I had other people told me after from, and I'm sure Helms, people that were there in the audience, like either Pack or like Listis or like many other people, that were just viewing it, and they said it was easily one of the greatest, if not the greatest meet they've been to. So I view it as a massive win. And from just a pure spectator standpoint, it was very entertaining. The women's side, as you said, Sonita, first woman in the squat over 300 kg, like so many notable things. Agata, what she did. The male side, what seemed Helms for you and everyone, like are you kidding, myself included, you see Jesus's training and it's at such a high level and it seems everything's going so right that he's going to blow it up, and then that's the way that it shakes out. So it was just fantastic.
Yeah, well said. I totally echo everything you said. And I do want to put some respect on Jesus's name, because it just kind of didn't go his way. It wasn't like, oh, I thought he was stronger than that. Not at all the case. So he took what I thought was the right conservative move of squatting 478, which he chipped the world record of 477.5, which was what I think Ray did a few years back at the Arnold when it was a place you could set world records. And then 2019 when he squatted 490. By the way, 1,000 pounds, which was the iconic one he did, is like 453 point something. And he did 455. And that was the one that went crazy on SportsCenter, first unequipped squat. So we're talking well in excess of that, approaching 1,100 pound squats, right? So Jesus nabbed the squat, got 3 for 3 on squats, and then because of a missed rap command, lost out on 20 kilos on bench for getting out of position, I think, on that first one. So that put him in a really tough spot. But his last pull, his deadlift, the 429 attempt, was not a Hail Mary.
Yeah.
He's actually put up a 426 training deadlift that he's seen. So that was by no means out of the question. So there's a different reality where he doesn't jump the rack command. And he doesn't need to go to 429. He only needs to go to 409. And that is a huge monster total, that's going on here. And he would have out-totaled himself. Just to put him having a rough day where everything kind of went wrong in perspective to how strong he is, he totaled 1113. Okay? The highest total Ray Williams has ever done. And the second total by any other person in a raw drug tested competition was 112.5 by Ray Williams.
Yeah.
So that's Jesus on a bad day.
Yep.
So I think people just need to realize that just because he slipped to 11th, he made the right calls. Technical error, I'm stuck with what I got. I went 3 for 3 on squats and I missed the bench twice. One of them I would have got it. He was on track if not for that. And it put him in a position, where he had to stretch himself a little too far, and the cramps on the hands, it's tough to deal with that. So first, definitely some respect on his name. I also want to put some more respect on Carlos Peterson Griffith's name, because I mentioned the battle of 93s, and he was actually a 93. He earned himself a discussion, or being part of that discussion, because while Gavin Aiden ended up with the squat world record, I think, of 337, Carlos got it for a period before it got then taken. He squatted 332.5, and it was 331 by none other than Anatoly Novopasmeni when he was a 93. Apologies on the mispronunciation there. Who Anatoly is one of the best lifters alive. And he was actually coming in injured in total 925.5. He's good for like 940, maybe even as high as 950 at 105. He's an incredibly strong lifter. And, training in the Ukraine, I've heard they've had some rough spots lately. So the fact that he was able to do that and injured and come in. So there's a lot of storylines to be talked about here. I really could go on about the Sheffield a lot longer, but just to give some perspective on what does this mean for the sport. And going from there being money meets that would occasionally pay out $1,000 or $2,000. Gustav Hedlund won 30,000 pounds. And that's a combination of winning the title and then, individual lifts that you can get money from. And Agata Sitko got 40,000 pounds because she broke the world record in the, I think, the bench as well as winning, the top spot. So all the way from 7th place up is making more than 10,000 pounds in the women. And on the men's side, everyone from 5th place and up is making more than 10,000 pounds of money because you're getting paid per world record and then also based upon your placing. So we're talking about payout of 255,000 pounds that were given out to these 24 people. And I think that is just a unheard of amount. Like, obviously, you compare that to certain sports, it really looks like it's a drop in the bucket, but it is a monumental leap forward from where we currently are. So, yeah, just to kind of give the broad recap, and then I'll leave it there. Top 3 women: Agata Sitko, Leah Babwa, and then Carol Ligara, all the 69s. Right after that, shout out to our hometown favorite, Evie Corrigan, who was the top of the pile outside of the 69, which is really saying something because that was the kind of the weakest record. And then big shout out to the 84 pluses, Brittany Schlater, totaled 710 at 84 plus, and then not to be outdone by Sonita, totaled 708 right behind her, but also squatted 300.5. And then Carlina Tongotia, for the first time, totaling over that 600 total she did at Commonwealth, proving I can do this after travel. I can do this under pressure. 610.5 at 76. Jad Jacob coming out on top of Natalie Richard in the 57s, who she did not get that at Worlds. And Jad Jacob had a great day, multiple lift world records. And even though she only placed 8th, she actually made the 3rd most money out of anybody because she broke a bunch of individual lift records. And, it just goes on from there. And everyone all the way, like I said, through 11th broke the world record. And then the top 3 did in the men. So Gustav Hedlund at 100.8%, Jonathan Keiko at 100.6%, and Delaney Wallace at 100.2%, and breaking guess who's record, Russ Orhe, and then Gavin Aiden just off the podium, finally getting that squat world record, which was a big deal. Panna totaling over 700 to win the battle of the 66s. Timothy Monagatti and also Carl Johansson battling out in the 74s. They had it really rough because just at the Euros, Kel Beckland, who's one of the only people who's ever beaten Taylor Atwood, totaled 800 kilos to push that world record up a good bit, showing that he's around. He's going to be a problem. He was an alternate for Sheffield. He did not get to compete, but it basically took the 66s out of kind of the rankings because he pushed the world record up by a good, I think 12, 15 kilos, something like that. I can't quite remember. So a lot of interesting stuff happened. You can go watch the replay. I highly encourage you to. It was incredibly interesting to watch, and some big favorites. A lot of people had Kyoto Uchiyama as well as Jesus Olivares in your 1 through 3rd spots. Nobody had Delaney Wallace. I think people thought Gustav Hedlund was capable of doing it, but no one had predicted him to do it. So seeing Gustav Hedlund win, seeing Kiyosha and Jesus down in 10th and 11th, and seeing Delaney on the platform as well and coming off an injury, it was just a really, really exciting day of sports, even if you're not a powerlifting fan. So I will leave it there and we can move on.
I mean, Helms, that's fantastic. We're going to wrap up within 5 to 10. Yeah, but go, Trex.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I get this in there before we wrap up. There were some nasty rumors swirling a bit earlier that maybe I was yawning more than an average person would during a conversation. I want to go ahead and nip that in the bud. Had nothing to do with the stimulating conversation. Today, I was screening for a systematic review that I'm working on and meticulously working through about 300 studies today. So my brain, you're going to yawn from time to time when you put yourself through that. So Helms, I just want to gas you up here with some praise. You killed it, man. A truly tremendous summary of incredible athletes doing amazing things. And anything that looked like a yawn could have just been an unrelated medical condition that I'm working through. Could have been a yawn. Hard to really tell these days.
And thank you for one. Thank you. 2, I didn't see a yawn. And 3, if someone was to claim that was a yawn, and then it turns out that you have sleep apnea an undiagnosed medical condition, or God forbid, we become a duo again. And that yawn was that point, they're going to feel terrible. So I would say to anyone listening, don't do that to yourself. Don't set yourself up for that.
Be careful. Be careful out there.
Oh, the comments. No, I thought that this is a fantastic episode. It's always great to have the trio back at it. And Helms, I think especially because we do have a portion of our audience that, they really are hardcore into powerlifting, tested powerlifting. They'll appreciate this episode. And I think, Trex, the reason why myself and Helms, we even wanted to have this recap is that as people that are passionate about the sport, we know that things like monetary compensation, right? If things like greater exposure can, in some ways, lead to, better opportunities in sport, more people wanting to participate in it, keeping it afloat, keeping it viable, because I think you mentioned this, Helms, where you're talking about the new fields emerging or ways to derive income from powerlifting. It needs to be viable. We know that people that are able to more or less be full-time athletes typically perform better. There's many different variables within that, but we want to see it continue to grow. And that's why it being done at the highest level with Sheffield, the standard that they set, the athletes all coming together, the way that they held themselves as champions, like champion against champion, and someone that, we've been watching powerlifting for a long period of time. I remember watching some of those meets, like some of those very notable lifters when I first got into 2010, 2011, where it was either Stan Efforting or you see Dan Green, and they were held at, and now that's untested powerlifting granted, but they were the big names in the space, and they're held at a local, gym, and everything was kind of a mom and pop setup. Not that that's a bad thing, but to be able to see it that all these people can travel, many of them halfway around the world, in order to lift, that there's an audience, 2,000 spectators, all the paid. It makes one excited for the future, because I do know some other sports, there's, the issues with Olympic weightlifting, many different things not worth getting into, but it kind of has left a blemish on that sport that both myself and Helms really enjoy. And even things, let's say, like CrossFit, some of the things that the changing kind of systems and waves and trends and so on and so forth. So it's just nice to see a sport that you still very much enjoy seem like it's on the right path. So nothing but respect to the athletes, to SBD, Sheffield, and all the participants as a whole that allowed it to be such a success this year.
Absolutely.
Well said. I got nothing to add. I'm just excited that World Games is going to have unequipped powerlifting in 2025, folks.
Trex, we got to get you out of retirement, man. This is what the whole thing. You said, hey, you had that state record. It's time.
You know what? I will say that I have gotten fed up with my injury situation that has been going on. I've been dealing with chronic pain related to the same injury since 2017. Today, I made an appointment to see if a butcher wants to just cut me open and see what they can do. I'm finally following in the footsteps of Helms. I'm going to say, cut me open. If you can fix it, great. If you can't, don't wake me back up.
Hey, man, let me give you a third option. And I want you just to envision this. Close your eyes for a second.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you 2 pieces of kit that you need. Okay. 1, board shorts. 2, wrist wraps, but no belt or knee sleeves. And then 3, we have Trex, a state title holder in the bench only, whatever weight class you need to be to also be the concurrent WBF World Men's Physique Champion in a few years. I'm telling you what, man, there's a direct path. When I got that hip surgery, it's just a mere 6 years later to when I got my pro card and placed 7th at Worlds. And as we know, I am not Deion Sanders like you. You have the genetics to where I think you could do it at maybe 5 years, and you could absolutely win a world title in men's physique while benching something absurd at that body weight. You don't need your hips for squats or deadlifts.
Where we're going, you don't need the hips.
Yeah. I will say, on a serious note, I actually cannot bench from this injury. It's so pervasive and frustrating. But point taken, and I'm going to get there with the butcher, and they're just going to cut me open and just rearrange everything and see if we can build something new.
Men's physique is still there. I know what I said. You know what?
I was going to say this privately, but I have a great pain science roundtable, Trex, I could forward to you afterwards, because it sounds like you're kind of catastrophizing this a little bit. And I just want you to, like what actually someone told me one time when I experienced with Helms, it was definitely not Helms. That I had a little bit of lower back pain. I had an acute thing occur just to walk it off. So we might actually have to edit that one out, Helms. I don't know what Trek said, but
I want to be like Helms and get one of those placebo surgeries that made it.
Yeah.
You didn't need it, right, Helms?
No, it was elective.
Yeah, it was elective, right.
Just purely so I could squat the depth, honestly.
It was mostly just to like aesthetically improve his hip bones and his hip.
Yeah, how they're shaved off and curved. Yeah.
Yeah.
I needed it as much as anybody needs to squat 500 pounds in their life, which I did after that hip surgery. So I did.
Well, there you go.
No, fantastic. I do seriously hope, Trex, you feel better. It always feels great to have the trio. I want to say thank you to every single person for listening to another episode of Iron Culture. You could go ahead and leave a rating and review. Most of the time it's 5 stars. Sometimes it is 1 star. Unfortunately, I think we lost Full Sturker. Maybe not. Maybe it's going to be a series of reviews. But on Apple iTunes is where people leave those reviews. Go ahead and drop one. We're back every single insert date here from now until the end of time. We'll catch you in that next episode.